All right, we are live on the Las Vegas Triathlon Club page, and we are recording. I'm John Mercer, president of the Las Vegas Triathlon Club, and today we've got another TED Talks Triathlon. What's in your toolkit? And I've got Ted Gerard, who's really the motivation for getting these videos going. Hey, Ted, how's it going?
Good, yeah, really good today. We're gonna go over our toolkit. It's actually interesting. I purposely didn't even open mine. I was like, we're gonna see what's actually in here.
That's right.
And this is, I think it's set up pretty much how I have it set up for racing. So it'll be kind of interesting to make sure I've got the right stuff in here. So
that's perfect. And I did the same thing. I've got my kit on here. I've got my Camelback, and I'm just planning to open it up and see what's in there. So
I think this is gonna be good. So
well, I'll tell you, actually, I was riding the other day and I came across another cyclist, a new cyclist, and he had his tire and tube off. And I asked, stopped and said, "Hey, do you need any help?" And he said, "No, I'm okay." But then he says, "Oh, but I've got this hole right here," and it was a hole in the rim tape. And so the hole in the rim tape was, that's where the tube was going down in and flattening out. I said, "Well, you need a boot." And he said, "What's a boot?" I said, "Oh, you need something to cover that right now." And then we talked about some different strategies, and we may get that tonight because you got to have all these little tricks to fix things along the way.
I'll tell you a little funny story. One time I was riding and I didn't have a boot, and we'll talk about what a boot is. And it was still in town, and someone pulled over and they're like, "Do you need any help?" I'm like, "Do you have like a little piece of cardboard or paper?" And the guy had a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, nice.
And so he emptied out his cigarettes and gave me the carton.
Yeah.
And I was like, thankfully this guy smokes.
Yeah, right.
Because it worked.
That's awesome. Well, I took my gel. I took my gel out actually, and I should have just given them the gel, but I ended up eating the gel, and I said, "Here's the wrapper, and you can use this."
Yeah.
I covered up, and
yeah, it's amazing what we can use. But ultimately, you're right. We should try and be prepared for those things. And
well,
one of the things we'll talk about as we think about preparing is having the tools, but also knowing how to use them.
That's right. And I think something you and I talked about was with this COVID-19 and return to racing, it seems like a lot of the race directors are going to have less aid stations and less support on the course. And so it makes even more sense to be able to do some of these quick fixes while out on the course, if nothing else, just to get back to transition, but hopefully to get back out and start racing.
Well, and then to do them efficiently, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, by yourself, because I can also see that people are not going to be as willing to stop and help potentially.
That's right. That's right.
If people are like practicing social distancing, maybe they're going to say, "You know what, I'm good. Like, I'm not going to stop and maybe help somebody." I don't know. I'm just speculating on that.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and let's see what you got in your bag of tricks, and then we'll go through mine.
Well, why don't we? I get the dual screen going here, so people can see us both. So why don't we pull off our toolkit and start going through and compare what we have?
Mine's actually attached, and maybe we could talk about why I chose this toolkit.
Okay.
So this is an X-Lab, and not sponsored by them. It's called an Aero pouch, and it's actually attached directly to my seat. And some of the seats now are coming with these 10mm holes that go through them. This is bolted basically directly into that 10mm hole. And then my water bottle fits in here.
Yep.
And then this is my toolkit. It's actually attached.
Okay. So why don't you get on the other side of your bike?
Yep.
And I can hear you better when you're talking to the screen. And then let me pull mine off. I have to take mine off. So
you take this off, and then I'm going to open mine up. So mine has a zipper. And like this. And then the first thing that comes out is a CO2 cartridge.
So what I do is, if this happens during a race or even on a training day, I have to take my pack off. And then when I'm done doing what I'm doing, if it's a race, I just stick it back in my jersey. I don't try to work it back on onto the bike.
So with my system, obviously I don't have to take it off, and so I don't have to worry about putting something back on. And actually, believe it or not, this can holds quite a bit. So I've got one CO2. I've got an auto inflator, and you know, the thing I was, as I was thinking and preparing about thinking about this talk, the auto inflators are really nice to work with your CO2. And one of the things that I'm going to bring in a little closer to the camera here is to see my auto inflator. So I've went through many iterations of different auto inflators, and I've come to the conclusion that a spring-loaded one is best for, especially for racing.
Okay.
You know, rather than trying to, the other ones that they make, you screw it on and then you have to screw the CO2 onto it, and that regulates the pressure. Where the spring-loaded ones, you can actually basically, with a spring, you can turn it by pushing it in and out. You can regulate how much air pressure you get. And so, you know, you may not utilize the full amount. And in a race situation, you know, I've seen lots of times people put too much air in and blow their tube. They put too much in too fast, blow a tube. So I personally like a spring-loaded one. The one thing I would advise people on, if you get a spring-loaded one, is every now and then go check the spring, because I've actually had springs that kind of locked up or adhesed with a bunch of like gels or Gatorade or junk in them. So just check the spring, and even you can lubricate that spring if you want. So that's what I use. I don't know, John, what do you use for?
Well, and that's a great point, because I remember going to a race and I had a flat and I pulled my chuck out and it wouldn't work because I hadn't used it in so long. And so that's now one of my pre-race checks, is to make sure I have an adapter that works. So
I think that's.
I was going to say, and I think what you said was really important, is you don't empty the canister out.
Yeah.
You do a little bit, enough just to get the air in, and then you still save it. It won't last that long, but I still hold on to mine. And then if I need to stop and do another fill up, I'll do that.
Exactly. And so I don't know about you, John, but I go with the 16 grams. They make a 20 gram as well.
Yeah.
I know people race with 20 grams because they can do 2 out of 1.
Okay.
So I just do the 16 gram. What do you use?
Okay. Well, $20.
20.
Yeah.
I never give a 20 just in case I got to get to the sag tire that take my 20.
Yeah.
I got a 1.
Oh, nice. Okay. My tube, and I think people need to make sure, if they're using wide tires, make sure you get the right tube.
Yep.
Because I've got 28s on my wheels right now, and I like to have a little bigger tube for the 28.
Well, let me ask you this. You've got some carbon wheels, right?
Yep.
So do you have an extender already put on your?
I do. So.
Me too, right?
Yep. Here's my baggie of stuff. But what I decided to do for my kit was, so my tire lovers.
Yep.
Metal ones, so that makes it easier. Latex gloves, in case I don't feel like getting my hands all dirty. I've got one of the adapters that you can just screw on top of the valve.
Yep.
And I try to carry these in case I run into anyone that needs help too, and they forgot their valve. So,
so on your spare, do you have one installed right now?
I don't have it on the spare right now because it's a little harder to wrap the tube with the extender on it.
Okay.
Do you put your extender on?
So I actually have mine in here as well. And I too have a tire lever. I just keep one tire lever. And I like put them all together with, I don't know if you can see, with the rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my tire lever on one side, rubber banded to my tube. And then my valve extender is actually on here.
Yep.
As well. And once again, in my spare, I use one that you can just screw on. So once again, if I'm out and once again somebody needs, for example, a valve extender, I can just take it off and use them if I had to. And then I have it Teflon taped onto my tube for security, so it's ready to go. And I keep one, not racing, but just for riding around town and stuff. I actually keep 2 tubes. So I actually have a tube that's actually Velcroed under my seat.
Oh, nice.
Between my
That's smart.
rails.
Yeah.
And, never gets in my way. It has an extender on it as well.
Yeah.
And then actually I keep 2 tubes, and I usually keep 2 CO2s, but I don't have my second CO2 here now.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I just realized I've only got one CO2 as well. I've been trying to get the new bike set up with the toolkit. But I think it's important on valve extenders, this one, I don't need to take the core off.
Right, exactly. And that's what you want in your emergency kit.
And that's right. And I think that's important that people should distinguish between ones that you have to take the valve off and those that you don't. And for an emergency kit, I'll just use one that does not take the valve off. And I've got another tube in my bike in my secret compartment down there.
You get the top secret compartment.
I've got a second tube there because I like to have 2 tubes as well.
When I'm riding around town, I like to keep 2 tubes, 2 CO2s.
Yep.
I learned the hard way a few times where I double blowouts, and you know, there's nothing quite as I don't know, makes you feel bad than calling your wife when she's at work.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can you come pick me up? I'm down in Southern Highlands. Or it's not a good thing. I also I keep just one tool with me. I keep a 4mm Allen wrench, hex wrench. My bike, almost everything's a 4mm, so I just keep one in there, and I really don't keep anything else in my toolkit. That's all I have.
That's nice. Okay, so here's my valve, and it is a screw on one, and then to regulate, I just have to start unscrewing the CO2.
Yeah.
And that's how that one works. And if people, you need to practice with your valve, just like you were saying, because every valve is a little bit different. I have to carry a 5 for my tire, for my axles, because disc brakes. And then I do carry a core remover.
Yep.
And I just got a little one because I've got a couple of bolts. This will also work with my disc brakes if I have to loosen up the pads or tighten them, whichever way. And I actually got a second one of these. I don't know why I got 2 in there. It's killing me.
Just in case. And so, John, people might not know. Why don't you explain to them how that little tool works and what that tool does?
This one? This one. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is a core remover and a core tightener. So if I was going to take the valve or take the core off and put an extender on it, or let me do it with the tube here.
And as John's doing that, I'll let everybody know that only certain tubes have removable cores.
That's right.
You have to look when you buy, it'll say it's a removable core. So obviously don't try this on a non-removable core.
Yep, that's right. And they almost look the same when you're looking at them. So this is a removable core. It's out of focus. Maybe I need to. All right, so that's our Presta valve. And then I take this tool and I fit that hole right over the entire core like that.
Yeah.
And then I just twist it counterclockwise to take off. And then the core comes out.
And so John's doing that so he can fit a valve extender on with that actually has an elongated position piece with a core already in it. And
I don't have, I can run downstairs and grab one. But, you know, I think it's also good just to look at how our Presta valve works. Maybe that's too much detail, but you unscrew the top, and then when you start pushing on your pump, it presses down on that, the air pressure pushes down on that, and that opens up the inside of the valve. So when you put your Presta head on, you don't need to push it down hard. You just need to place it on there, and then the air pressure will push that head down.
Yeah, it's just got to create a seal. And one other thing I will mention is also in Nevada, where it's really, really dry all the time, is the seals inside those things can also go.
Yes, yeah.
and it's mostly because of the lack of humidity that we have. So it's another thing to kind of keep in mind. And, you know, John mentioned that that's a check that he always does to make sure his regulator is working, or he called it his chuck is working. But you do want to kind of keep an eye on that, the little seal inside, because I actually had one almost completely disintegrate on me. Basically, I think it's just from the heat and being outside all the time, and, you know, hot in my garage, hot outside riding. Yep. It's just something to keep in mind.
So to use this valve extender, which is you do not need to remove the core for, all I do is undo the head, and then I just screw this on top. And now that's just an extender, so the air pressure is still going to push down on that valve to open it up. But now that valve never screws down tight, which is fine because that's the way the Presta works. The air pressure inside the tire will push back up on the valve, and that will seal it. But obviously what we all do is tighten that part down, and that just pulls the valve back up to close it manually. So
I actually have with me, this is a valve extender with a removable core put into it.
Yeah.
So then you can see the bottom of it. This would screw into that piece that we took out, that John took out. So that would screw in here, and then this one has a Presta valve on the top. So that's my preferred method for not an emergency situation. I find that that's the most reliable method long term. And there's advantages and disadvantages of each, but I find that that's the best way to do it.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And you put on Teflon tape on each connector, right?
Absolutely.
How many times do you wrap around?
Like 2.
Okay.
Yeah. If you get too wide, then it just kind of it punches up. If you go more than 2, I find.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Let's see. Now, if I go for a long ride, I take my Camelback and I pack it up with lots of stuff. So okay. I'll actually take I don't have it here, but I take I have a little fold in my wallet that pulls out my driver's license, my insurance card, and I'll usually stick a credit card in there too. Like if I'm going, you know, to Searchlight or somewhere where it's just maybe nice to have a few extra things. And then I have lots of stuff in this. I got extra sunscreen.
All right.
Lots of fuel. Oops. Lots of extra fuel in here. I do take one of these toolkits. Yep. You actually pointed me in the direction of this, which is great.
Oh yeah, I got one too.
Yep, and this is just, again, great for training rides to have a few extra tools.
Well, and that little toolkit you have basically has everything you could ever need.
Yep.
Plus, it's a built-in torque wrench.
More electrolyte, the boots.
Yep.
This is what I was trying to get the other cyclist. I said, just go get a couple of these. You can just stick these into the rim, in between the rim and the tire.
Yep.
So I carry a couple of those on training rides. And then I've got more CO2. I've got 2 more tubes in here.
I'll add in, I find that in Nevada in particular, we have a lot of debris on the road.
Yep.
I get more flats when I'm riding in Nevada than anywhere else.
Yep.
You know, so I think that's important that you are prepared.
And I'll take a repair kit.
Yep.
Just if I'm feeling like I've got a little time and I want to repair it as I go along. But I've got 2 more tubes here. So on a long ride, I've got 4 tubes I take. Yep. And I've gone through 2 easily. And, you know, I hate getting down to having no tubes. And that's it. And I take a 3-liter ladder. So, and then sometimes, you know, depending on time of year, I'll take another liter bladder. I'll freeze it and I'll stick that in the bag as well. So I'll carry sometimes 18 pounds of water.
Yeah. Well, that's good for adding a little bit more resistance to your training, right?
Right. That's right. A little slope resistance.
And, and the truth is, like, John, I know you pack a lot, but you do a lot of long rides. I mean, it's not uncommon for you on a Sunday to do a 100-mile ride.
Yeah, that's right. And I tend to do them on my own. And so you've got to sort of be self-sufficient. And especially on some of these rides where it's pretty low traffic, like if you go out North Shore,
Yeah.
out Lake Mead, or,
And out there, you oftentimes don't have cell reception either.
say it again?
Often out there, you don't have cell reception either.
That's right. That's right.
You really are on your own. And yeah, I think it's imperative that we are prepared. I can't tell you how embarrassing it is to have to hitchhike back. And I've done it, and it's it's embarrassing, and it's like it's hard to be at the mercy of a stranger.
Yeah.
The last time I hitchhiked back, and it was purely because I not switched stuff around correctly, and I thought I had something in and I didn't, and I literally, it was in California. I hitchhiked down from Mount Baldy all the way back down to the base, which also sucked because I made it all the way to the top and got a flat at the top, and I didn't get to enjoy the ride down.
Oh boy.
Right, and then the guy only had he had a car, so then I had to take both my wheels off, and we barely fit it in his trunk.
Oh.
So being over prepared is absolutely a good thing on a train ride as well as on a race.
Mm-hmm. All right, you want to talk gearing?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about gearing. I think that it's good thing to talk about because I think that a lot of people don't understand all the intricacies of gearing. So when we talk about gearing, I think the first thing to understand is gearing is what makes these bikes work, right? Like what makes every ride can be easy or every ride can be hard depending on your gearing. If you think about those people that they ride like a fixed gear bike, it becomes really, really hard going uphill and really, really hard going downhill, right? And so the advantage of a bike like this or your bike is that we have gearing, but the thing that most people don't realize, in my experience, is that you can change the gearing to make it more or less advantageous for you. And obviously when we are training or racing, we want to make it the most advantageous possible and the best setup for us personally. So let's talk really quickly. Let's start about talking about the front, John. Let's talk about the chain rings to start. So the chain rings, and I don't know, can you see the chain rings on my bike? Just low enough?
The front? Yeah.
Let me see if I can tilt it down a little bit more. There we go. So this is the chain ring. Okay, so a lot of people don't realize, but you can actually switch the chain rings. It takes a little bit of work. You gotta know a little bit what you're doing because you have to take the crank off to do it. But you can change this, and you can have dramatic effects by changing the chain rings. So right now I'm running, I think it's a 53. Yeah, I'm running a 5339. So 53 teeth here, 30, nope, sorry. It's a 5342.
Oh, okay, interesting. I got a 5339.
Yeah, I think it's, well, let me see, I might have a 30. I can't even remember the interval because I never see it. 39, yeah, 5339.
Okay.
And that's, most people consider that a standard. But I think that the front chain ring actually has more to do with how much strength you have. And how many, basically how many watts that you can produce. And I know a lot of people don't have power meters, but the bigger the chain ring in the front, the more strength you need to basically turn it around. Mm-hmm. That's what I always look at. But if I was to run a really, really flat course, I could go to a 55, I could go to a 56. They even make crazy like 61s. Mm-hmm. Tony Martin, famous time trialist, he was riding somewhere in the 60s, had custom built chain rings, and like a track cyclist will have really big front chain rings. So then they make it's kind of standard. That's kind of a standard size, and then they make smaller. They make a mid-compact and a compact. That's the Shimano. That's what they call it, but different companies call them different things. But basically, it's number of teeth. So you may see a 5139 or 5137. 51 means the outer So the bigger number is the outer, the smaller number is the inner. And so let's say you were going to go to a race that had a lot of climbing, and you were nervous about a lot of climbing. If you had the ability, you could change the front chain ring to smaller, and that actually smaller here will make it easier for you to climb, right? And really, it's all about smaller on the inner, because you're going to be on the inner ring when we're climbing. But there's only so much ratio that your front derailleur can switch between, right? So 53-39 is pretty standard. I can't go with a 53-37, for example. My front derailleur won't allow that.
Right.
If I wanted to go smaller on the inside, I have to go smaller on the outside.
Got it. Okay, so let me take a step back, because I know I hear people ask a question a lot about, wait, what does compact mean?
Yeah.
And compact basically is just going to give you a smaller, bigger chain, bigger ring in the front.
That's smaller, both big and small.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
both,
right. For both of them. But yeah, you can get smaller for the two gears in the front.
Yeah.
That's all the compact means.
Well, it means, and that's in compact, I think, is like this, unless you pretty much go custom made, it's going to be the smallest. It'll be a mid compact, which will be kind of like in the midway, and then a standard. Yeah, exactly. And see, this is where the terminology gets bad, because it's only called that by Shimano.
Yeah, right. And it's just because of the way they made the crank, is that it was more compact, and so they could get a smaller chain rings on the front. That was it. Yeah. But it's very confusing.
And then it depends also sometimes on your, this is getting a little bit in depth, but on, I think they call it the spider. So the inner piece will also dictate how small you can go.
Yep.
So they make smaller inner pieces on those compact cranks to allow for a smaller chain ring. I don't think I can get that size chain ring even on my bike.
Okay.
So,
well, at some point we might want to talk about gear ratios and what that is, but maybe not tonight. But gear ratios, just briefly, is the bigger, if your front gear and your back gear are the same size, then every pedal revolution in the for your pedal is going to equal pedal revolution or wheel revolution in the back.
Yeah.
But the bigger you make that front one, for every pedal revolution, you can get multiple rotations of the rear wheel.
But it's harder to, but it takes more force.
That's right. Harder to get it going. That's right. Perfect.
But the other thing is that you can think about, like, you know, if you're going to be doing a race that's more downhill, having a bigger chain ring in the front would be really good.
Yeah.
When we did the Red Rock time trial, talking to one of the guys that he was really good. And on his time trial bike, he was running 57 in the front.
Oh, wow.
And he said, well, you know, this is more downhill than anything in this time trial, and I don't want to, you know, basically spin out.
Yeah.
And so people call it spinning out, where basically you don't have any gears left. Yeah. Right? So he was running 57 in the front, and he said for his flat time trial, he always runs a 57 or even larger. But he's a big guy, strong, powerful. But for most, I think, triathletes, they're not so concerned honestly about spinning out and having it not big enough, because for the most part, at least how I view a triathlon, is the downhills are a time to actually rest. You know, I don't have to be spinning as fast as I can, as hard as I can on the downhill. I utilize that time to like rest my legs a little bit, because that's, I think, it's important to take yourself for the run.
And I think the other way to think of it, if you never get into, and we're talking about the rear and the big in a bit, but if you never get your chain into the smallest gear in the back, you don't need a bigger front chain ring.
Exactly.
There's no need for it, because if you can't even get to that gear, then nothing. You don't need to change anything up front.
So I was listening to a podcast just yesterday. I was out riding, and it was a pro triathlete, and she was talking about one of her earlier races and how she didn't know about switching into the small chain ring. Switching into the small chain ring basically meant that she was going to get less power. So that's another thing we'll talk more about gear ratios at another point. But the small chain ring is there who can keep power going.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to put it in the small chainring. There's no difference when you're pedaling at however many watts you're pedaling, how hard you're pedaling.
Yep.
The small chainring is your friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a disadvantage to be in your small chainring at all. And the mechanics behind it don't work like that.
Yep.
So, you know, I actually kind of like my small chainring, to be honest with you. I feel like I've got pretty good range in my small chainring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's just me personally. So let's talk a little bit about the back, John.
Yeah.
So why don't you go off?
What's that?
Why don't you go ahead and tackle the back?
Oh, yeah, no, well, I've got a cassette right here.
Yeah.
So, same thing with the front. You have different size gears in the back, and they're numbered, or they are designated by the number of teeth on each cog. So this is a cog, this is another cog, and so forth. This is a gear, this is another gear. So again, terminology, it's a problem. And so this is a 12 at the smallest gear, 28 at the biggest gear. You can also get, for my system, I can go down to an 11 as the smallest and up to as high as a 32 on my derailleur. And your derailleurs are spec'd for certain ranges. I cannot go bigger than a 32 in the back.
See, the way I'm right now, I can only go at 28.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, unlimited. And it has to do with, you know, I'm using oversized pulley wheels.
Yep.
And the way the system is set up, it can only do a 28. My road bike, I can do a 30.
Okay.
Yeah. And what you can do on most derailleurs, just so people know, you can change the cage down here, and if the cage is bigger, you can actually add basically more gears. You can go to a 32 or even larger, depending on the length of it. But that's, once again, a lot of people have no idea that you can actually do that, and it's not an expensive thing to have done.
Yep. I just looked at Facebook real quick, and Bob asked, what do you think of oval chain rings? And that would be obviously the front. You have them, right?
Not on this, not now.
Okay.
I have them, and I use them a lot. I actually switched to round about a year and a half ago when I was having knee problems. I was trying to get everything out of that could possibly be an issue. So actually, it's interesting. I have 2 sets of round chain rings and I have 2 sets of oval, just for the different setups. You know, I wish there was better research, to be honest with you, on the ovals. I do like them when they're set up right. Mm-hmm. I found it difficult personally to get the exact setting right. So what I mean by setting is where the elongated piece is, or basically the shrunken piece is in relationship to your downstroke. I know there's lots of people that are proponents of oval chain rings. I actually, to be honest with you, couldn't tell the difference. Like in my power numbers, my fatigue level, you know, and the truth is, honestly, the next time I take my bike apart, I'm going to put the oval chain rings back on and just see where it's at. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's really worth the investment unless you're having problems. So I originally went from round to oval because I was having issues. So like, I'll switch to oval chain rings, and I was good with them for about 3 years. And you know, sorry,
Cosmo.
I'll let you talk for a second. Cosmo.
All right. Well, he's
the neighbors. The neighbors just showed up.
Oh, that's right. So actually, I just realized I miscounted my gears. So I actually have an 11 as the smallest, and I've got 10 speed. Now it's interesting. Back in the 80s when I raced, the oval front ring came out, and a lot of us moved to it. and it was great. But then there was a lot of criticism. You know, people would say, "Oh, well, it makes you pedal in squares and what have you." I never felt that. I'm using round now, but mostly because I just haven't taken the time to go buy another set of oval. Uh,
Yeah, I'm of the belief, and this will answer Bob directly. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah.
The only reason I changed was because I was having some issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was more for like a comfort issue than for performance. I really didn't notice much of a performance issue for me personally.
No, and Bob's writing from a physics standpoint, they're more efficient. And I do think that on one hand, you're very correct in terms of trying to maximize a lever arm. And I could go through, maybe one time we'll do the physics. I do actually do that in my class. I do the the lever arm of the pedal of the crank arm versus what happens at the chain wrapped around the chain ring. So it does make a lot of sense, but it also makes a lot of sense that you have to learn how to pedal so that you're pushing on the pedal as much as possible throughout the pedal stroke.
The other one thing I'll tell you is with the oval chain rings, it's harder to set up your rear derailleur.
Okay.
It's got it's more of a fine-tuned adjustment, and then you can the chances of you dropping your chain are a little bit greater. So if you shift at the wrong time, where it's more open, you actually have a greater chance of that. So I actually put a chain catcher on my front derailleur, and it was on purpose, so I wouldn't drop it.
Okay, so I just put my cassette back together, and I've got 10 gears or 10 speed cassette, so 10 cogs in the back, and I've got the smallest as 11, which is 11 teeth, and then 28 here. And what you want to do is pick, I could go with a 12-28 or an 11-28. The difference is I lose a gear in here if I go 11-28 versus 12-28. Now, most of the time, people will ride with their chain in these middle gears. And so by having another gear in here, it's a little smoother shifting between gears. And so again, if you never get to this 11-speed cog, this 11-tooth cog, you don't need it. But replace it with another gear that's going to give you a sort of a mid-range gear to work with. And that can help with pedaling and shifting between gears. So
John, you're showing us a 10-speed. On your new bike, you have 11?
Yes.
Yeah. So most bikes nowadays are 11-speed, and now the new thing is 12. There are 12 speed. So the SRAM axis system is 12 speed, and there's some talk that Shimano's next iteration, which should come out, was supposed to come out this summer at Tour de France, was going to be a 12-speed. That was kind of the guessing. It gives you one more option. So you mentioned about giving up a gear in the middle. Can you explain that a little bit more for people?
So if I keep the 28 and I take the 11 off, now I've got a 12, but I still have 10 gears that I can fit on my rear cassette. So I need to add another gear, and I can fit that gear in somewhere here in this range here.
So what would be, so why would someone want that?
Well, it makes for smoother shifting between gears. So think about shifting in a car. Well, if you have a standard, maybe that's a bad analogy. Not a lot of people do standard shifting, but if I don't have a good gear system set up, it would be like going from second gear to fourth gear.
Right.
It'd be really awkward. But by taking the 11 off, I could put in another gear, and then it would be going from second to third to fourth. And so that just gives me that middle gear, and it just makes that the pedal, keeping your pedal stroke going in between shifts, it can be a little smoother. And again, if you find yourself mostly in this range of your chain in the back, and you never get to here, you won't miss anything.
Right.
I mean, so you're going, 22, 24, 25 miles per hour, or downhill and trying to pedal that, you're going to be in that 11.
So John, I think it's important that we actually add a little bit of context to this. So just so people know, this it's kind of the opposite front to the rear, and this is the physics behind that. So the smaller in the rear is for when you're going faster, basically, and larger in the rear is for when you're going slower, or you need more torque to climb a hill. So if you don't get to a position where you feel like you've ran out of gears when you're going downhill, then you don't need an 11, right? Or if you feel like you never need to go to the biggest cog in the back, then you don't need a 32, for example, right? Or you don't need a 30, for example. And a lot of it honestly depends on where you're going to ride. And so one of the things that we've talked about offline is changing the cassettes to match what you're going to ride. So in Las Vegas, if you're just training, what do you choose?
I stick with an 1128.
Yep. So I do the exact same thing in Las Vegas. 1128 all day long. I've got a few of them. Let's just put it that way. But let's say you were going to go, I don't know, you're going to go to Colorado to do a bunch of climbing and mountain passes. Does that change your mind?
Yeah, I could go, I would want to add a 30.
Yep.
And maybe I drop my 11 and I go with a 12.
Yeah.
Because you can't have everything.
Right.
So, if I add a gear on this side, I've got to take a gear away somewhere.
Yeah. And you would choose to take it off of the 11. See, I might not. I might take one out of the middle somewhere. So then I get the descents where I could go and not spin out. But that's a personal preference. And you're right. You always have to give something up.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then for me, I do quite a few races where I have a really flat race course. So last year I raced in Florida a couple times and I raced in Georgia. And so in that case, I actually choose to go with a cassette we call it a flat cassette or flatter cassette. So it still has 11 gears, but I can have an 1123 or even 1121. And when you're on I think I use an 1123. It's so nice because the difference between each gear is so small that you can really dial yourself in. And if you're in a flat course, and the only difference is the wind, a little wind direction from place to place, having that ability to just make micro changes between is really, really nice. Now, you don't have to, but you'll find yourself kind of stuck in between gears when you don't necessarily have to be. That's an important thing for people to understand is it's very much course specific. So a couple of years ago, I was actually contemplating doing the Alpe d'Huez triathlon in Europe. And I was like, okay, what do I need? And I'm like, okay, I need to go to a mid-compact front, and I need to get at least a 30 in the back because, for that hour-long climb, it's getting up to, 11, 12% a bunch of places. I want to be able to really spin. So, I mean, these are the decisions that are based around racing. So it's not uncommon to look on like the Facebook page, even our club Facebook page, but like race Facebook pages. And Oceanside is always one that comes up. People are always asking, what gearing should I have for Oceanside? Because they get those 3 hills, and they're a certain percentage. And John, what is the right answer for somebody for Oceanside for selection of?
Well, it really does depend on your technique for going up hills. I am out of the saddle climber, so I hardly ever change from an 1128. It would take a really extreme hill, like maybe like what you're talking about, or going up and doing Death Ride at Tahoe, or when we did Nice, that was a pretty good climb, but I still did that in 1128 because I'm an out of the saddle climber. That's just how I'm comfortable. But some people are spinners, and they may want a 30 or 32, but it depends on technique.
So I always tell people this, at least from Las Vegas. I say, go ride the loop. And are you comfortable climbing the loop where you're not dropping your cadence below, let's say 60.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want. You can pick a number, say 75 or whatever. If you're a faster cadence, maybe pick your percentage. Don't go 20% below your preferred cadence.
Yeah.
If you have to go 20% below your preferred cadence, you probably need you need to switch something up.
Mm-hmm.
That's always for me a good test, because that's a steep climb, especially on the last mile.
Yeah.
And very much similar to what you see at Oceanside. That's the other thing I tell people is, like, find something around that is similar to the course that you're going to do, and look at what your cadence ends up being. Because when you get to really low cadences, I stand up and I climb as well, but I don't want to be at 30 or 40 RPM where I'm really just grinding myself to the ground and killing my legs, and then I can't run off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing for people to do, is kind of test it out.
And this goes back to our course recon discussion, is being able to do good course recon ahead of time. But I will say that we have a huge advantage here in Las Vegas, is because we've got some great terrain that if you can ride around here comfortably, you can probably ride almost anywhere.
Yep.
I remember when we went to Austria and we were at Zalem, and all of a sudden we discovered there's a little bit of a hill there.
Yeah, a little bit 14% grade at the top.
And it was pretty sustained. And so I know I quickly ran out to get an extra cassette and I put that on my wife's bike I think I did put a 32 on hers just to make that a little bit more comfortable going up.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm traveling right now, and one of the climbs around here, I've done it before, and it's got a section that's 20 to 21%.
Oh wow! Yeah, well, that's the Three Sisters around the River Mountain Loop.
But steeper than that.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And I did it. The last time I was here, I did it on my road bike, and I barely made it up. And it was on an 1128, but I have a smaller front chainring, and so I have my time trial bike here now, and I have a friend here. He asked me, he's like, "Do you want to go ride that?" I'm like, "No, I don't think I can make it up it."
Yeah.
Right? Even though I'm a pretty powerful cyclist, and I like to stand up, but I'm just because I don't have the gearing to do it. And the downside is, if you get something like that, you'll fall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, you'll be going 3 miles an hour, and you'll hit a little patch of dirt or something like that, and you'll fall.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get into some extreme stuff, that's another thing to think about. We don't have anything in Southern Nevada that's like that. But you get down to California, especially to the coast, there are several little climbs that are in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And you do want to be aware of that as well.
Mm.
The one thing I'm going to add is, if you do make changes like this, you change your front chain rings, you change your cassettes, you do have to pay attention to your chain length.
Yeah.
So that's something to kind of keep in mind. If you go to, for example, a 32 in the back, well, you need more chain to get around that. Mm-hmm. So you may actually have to go out and get a new chain and have it sized correctly. And we're not going to get into sizing chains here, but that's something to also consider. It's not like you can just be like, I'm going to go today. I'm going to ride flat, so I'm going to put on an 1123, and tomorrow I'm going to ride some hills, so I'm going to put on a 1230. Yeah. And the chain will not necessarily work appropriately. Right. To do that. So that's something I'll to throw out there.
Yep. And your chain, if you've got a 10-speed, you need a 10-speed chain.
Yeah.
11-speed, you need an 11-speed chain. I know that sounds obvious, but it's the thickness of the chain sitting in the cog, and so you do need to match those up.
Exactly.
I take mine off a lot, and my front chain rings as well, just to clean.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't take my front chain ring off a lot because it does entail taking my whole crank apart.
Yep.
But I definitely do clean it a lot, and I absolutely clean my cassettes all the time and my chain all the time. I would say for me, I don't know about you, John, but I probably clean my cassette at least once a month, and my chain I definitely wipe down at least every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I take it off and clean it every month when I take my cassette off. I don't know what your schedule is.
I lube my chain pretty regularly, at least probably once a week. I wipe it down, I'll do a deep clean of the cassette and the chain. I probably do it less frequently. Now I do keep a race chain.
Yeah.
And I have a race cassette.
Yeah, me too.
And so those are separate, but my training stuff, I run into the ground.
For my A race of the year, it's usually a brand new chain.
Yep.
You know, actually not a brand new one that I've probably put 100 miles on. So I don't want to put brand new on just in case there's some issue. But you know, usually once a year I'll have one race that is like the most important race, and then I'll use that chain for my race chain until the next year. And I'll change it for that again. And you know, the truth is chains are not that expensive. Even to buy a really good high quality chain, you're looking at $40.
No, that's right. I was going to say $50. It's not bad.
And that's another thing that I think we can just quickly, you know, maybe finish off with is you should actually change your chain on a somewhat regular basis. Even my training chain, once or twice a year, I change it. And you know, I don't know if you have a chain checker, but there is a tool. It's very cheap, like a $10 tool, and you can check to see how much wear your chain has.
Yep.
And it'll actually keep your other components healthy to keep a tighter chain basically on.
I just realized I do not have a quick link in here.
Oh.
And I almost always keep a quick link.
But don't you have a quick link on your bike already?
I do, but if I needed to, if something happened, a chain broke for whatever reason,
try
to get it back together. Again, for training, and that's interesting. I don't have it. I almost always carry one in the bag. But again, I just put this bag together, seeing that I've changed the bike out. So
awesome. Well, I think we covered an awful lot in this hour. Were there any other questions from Facebook that came in?
Let me check. Ovos. Chris Fetter says hello. Chris is healing. He's getting better. He's going to be back out soon. No other questions there.
Okay, awesome.
This is good.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think we covered a lot of ground, and hopefully this will help. Reminder to everybody, if you're watching Sunday, we have the time trial.
Oh, that's right.
So, you know, go at that nice and hard, everybody, and we'll get those results up. And then I also put out the 7 continents, or what do I call it? Seven summits.
That's getting some chatter already.
Yeah, it's getting some chatter already. I think that's going to be a fun little project over the next 7 weeks for people. So, so look at those on the Facebook page as well, and hopefully we get lots of people out to some of these events as we're going through this difficult time. Awesome. Well, thanks for organizing that, and great chatting with you. Yep, you too. Have a good weekend. Okay, see you, everybody. All right, stop live stream.